Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down UFC Abu Dhabi, which goes down this weekend. It should be an earlier start time for the UK fans as well. Well, for every fan, but specifically in the UK, it should be one of these afternoon cards, or at least I'm hoping so anyway. And to be honest with you, on paper, it doesn't look like a bad card either. It's a decent fight night. There are some fights that maybe might not jump off the page, but like we always say, it might be those fights where, you know, somebody really stands out, somebody makes a statement, or it's a firefight, one of the potential fight of the night. So it's definitely a card that I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to watching it as well. And one of the reasons why I'm really hoping it is one of these afternoon cards is because if it finishes at, say, 12 a.m, 1 a.m. UK time, that's perfect for me, as I'll be travelling straight down to the airport after that as I'm going on holiday. I'm going to be going to Turkey, and that brings me to the next part. You might see on the description of the podcast that we've got UFC Vegas 95 and UFC 305 listed there on the timestamps, and the reason why is because there is going to be no podcast for the next two events, which is UFC Vegas 95 and UFC 305. I'm going to be away. I'm not going to have time to do it. However, what I will do is I will make the time to post on the YouTube community post, so I will put my picks, my predictions, method of victory on there as well. So make sure you subscribe to the MMA Play 365 YouTube channel, because although there will be no podcast, like I said, I will do a community post on the MMA Play 365 YouTube account, and I'll also drop it on my X account as well. And yeah, make sure you're following the X account if you want to, which is Newsome_MMA. I don't really post too much on there nowadays, but like I say, I will drop my picks and my predictions on there, as well as the YouTube community post. So like I say, there will be no podcast for the next two events after this, but I'll be right back at it after UFC 305. And just before we get into the breakdowns, as always, if you want to jump into the action, then you can do so at MMAplay365.com. We're coming off a really good event. Base AI, our UFC prediction software, had a really good event with plenty of correct predictions and methods of victory last weekend. And also from myself in regards to the official bets, I had a big bet on Mohammad which cashed. I had a medium-sized bet on Paddy Pimblett as an underdog. That cashed very easily as well. So yeah, we're coming off a really good event last time out in Manchester at UFC 304. And of course, as I always say, everything is in one subscription package at MMA Play 365. So you've got the Base AI UFC prediction software predictions, which gives you a percentage prediction for every possible outcome of every fight of every UFC event. You've got the fun parlay section. You've got the fun parlay options section as well in the fun gamblers section on the MMA Play 365 betting hub. You've got recommended bets with full written breakdowns. You've got official bets as well. Like I said, that's all packaged into one subscription. So make sure you hit up MMAplay365.com if you are wanting to jump into the action this weekend. And with the introduction out the way, the promos out the way, the updates out the way, let's get on to UFC Abu Dhabi. And of course, we start as always with the main event. We're in the bantamweight division. We've got Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. And this is a really high-level fight, and you have to think it's got title implications written all over it as well. With it being a main event, with it being 5 rounds, Cory Sandhagen's been at the top of the division for years. His record is 17-4. You've got Umar Nurmagomedov that's been blasting through the bantamweight division to get to a fight like this. He's 17-0, unbeaten. Of course, he's Khabib Nurmagomedov's younger cousin as well. And like I said, it's a super high-level fight. Whoever wins this fight, you have to believe he's going to fight the winner of Sugar Sean O'Malley and Merab Dvalishvili. Maybe the only way that that doesn't happen is if Merab beats Sean O'Malley and then they rematch, and you know that then sets Cory Sandhagen or Umar Nurmagomedov back a little bit. Maybe they have to have one more fight and fight the winner of whoever wins in that rematch. So yeah, obviously there are some things that can happen with that bantamweight championship fight that's already scheduled. But in regards to this fight, like I say, super high level. I think, though, that, look, I love Cory Sandhagen. I have done since he came into the UFC. I've loved watching him fight. I've cashed bets on him. You know, I've lost a couple of bets on him as well. But, you know, I really like Sandhagen. I love his style. I think he's an awkward fighter to deal with. I definitely think that he's a problem for a lot of the division. The issue is I don't think he's that much of a problem for Umar Nurmagomedov. Now, I'm not saying that Umar's going to absolutely whitewash Cory Sandhagen here. I genuinely don't believe that, because I think that Sandhagen is a good enough fighter to have moments in this fight. If it goes 5 rounds, do I think Umar Nurmagomedov wins all 5? No, I think Sandhagen might take a round, maybe make a couple of the rounds close as well. But I just don't think that if it does go 5 rounds, I don't think Sandhagen's going to comfortably win 3 of the 5 rounds. I think that's definitely going to be more on Umar Nurmagomedov's side. I think in regards to a finish as well, again, I think the finishing upsides with Umar are also, like Cory Sandhagen's got good striking, he's got good power, but unless he just catches Umar with maybe a head kick, Umar is going to have a slight reach and height disadvantage here. So maybe Sandhagen, does throw up a flying knee or a head kick and catches Umar and knocks him out. But I think it doesn't happen at a high clip. I think it's a low percentage outcome. I think more or less what's going to happen in the fight in regards to how it plays out is Umar Nurmagomedov's going to be hitting the takedowns. He's going to be taking Sandhagen down. I expect Sandhagen to be able to get back up to his feet a couple of times, but it's not going to throw Umar off his game. Umar will keep coming with the wrestling. He will be relentless. And I think Umar is absolutely the better grappler here. Like, he's the closest that you can compare to like a Khabib, obviously his older cousin, and Islam Makhachev as well. And I think that Umar is in that elite category of your Khabib, of your Islam Makhachev, and I think it's going to show in this fight. I fully expect Umar Nurmagomedov to win this fight. Then I fully expect him to fight for a title. Then I expect him to beat whoever's the champion. I don't think it matters whether it's Sean O'Malley, whether it's Merab Dvalishvili. And then I expect him to be a dominant champion after that and be one of those fighters that is a champion for years and just people or fighters just struggling to beat him. He'll see many different styles, and I think he just nullifies every single style. I genuinely believe that Umar Nurmagomedov is at the elite stage of his career, and it's just a fact that it's just a matter of time now that we just he needs to have the fights for us to be able to see that. He needs to fight this big step up in competition against Sandhagen, because we can't sugarcoat that. It is a big step up compared to other fighters that he's fought, but it's these fights where he's now going to prove that he's elite. I think he beats Sandhagen, then I think he wins the belt, and then I think that, he's put into the category high up on the pound for pound list as well. So yeah, I think that it's going to be a good fight. I think that Cory Sandhagen's going to have his moments, but ultimately I think Umar Nurmagomedov's going to get it in, whether that's a finish or a decision win. So for those reasons, I'm picking Umar Nurmagomedov to win this fight. And in the next fight, the co-main event, we've got another Magomedov. We've got Shara Bullet Magomedov versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. Shara Magomedov, pretty quick turnaround from just a few weeks ago when he fought Antonio Trocoli. He had a couple of opponents lined up for that fight, but ended up on Antonio Trocoli. And to be honest with you, look, Trocoli is actually not a bad fighter. I think that people are discrediting Magomedov after that fight. Like, there was, I don't know if it is a general consensus, but I just saw a few posts of people saying that the hype's not there and he's not as good as what people thought he was, and, eventually is going to get exposed. And look, at some point he is going to have that massive step up in competition that's going to be tough for him. But from what I saw in that Antonio Trocoli fight, and like I said, in my opinion, I don't think Trocoli is actually that bad of a fighter, and I think we'll see that in the coming years when he fights a little bit a little bit lesser of competition and starts fighting in and around his level and gets built up the right way. I think we'll see Trocoli do some good things, but I don't think that Magomedov looked bad against Trocoli at all. I think there was a clip that was going around on X where he threw a kick and missed and it looked a little bit sloppy, but, that doesn't paint the picture of the entire fight. I thought he looked good. I thought he looked sharp. I actually thought he was improved in regards to his takedown defense and his get-up game as well. So, yeah, I think Shara Magomedov is still the goods. I think he's a fighter that's only going to get better as well, but his striking's lethal. And I think this is a horrific matchup for Michal Oleksiejczuk. Listen, with Michal, I've cashed on him as an underdog before. I really like his fighting style. I love the Polish fighters in general. They're always forward pressure. They're always game to fight. They always come with big power. And like I said, they're a fighting nation, Poland. And it's hard not to love these Polish MMA fighters. So Michal Oleksiejczuk is a fighter that I like a lot. But like I said, he's I think it's a horrific matchup for him because Oleksiejczuk, he's not going to be shooting takedowns, which, like, even though I do think that Shara Magomedov has improved in regards to the wrestling defense and the get-up game, it's still the hole and the weakness in his game. It's still the area of the fight that he probably doesn't want to fight in. But Oleksiejczuk, I don't think he's going to threaten too much there. And even if he does shoot a takedown, I don't think that he's got the ability to complete multiple takedowns or keep Shara Magomedov on his back. I think it's a fight that's won and lost on the feet absolutely here. And the thing is with Oleksiejczuk, he's very boxing heavy. He's a good boxer. He will rip to the body and to the head. But the thing is with Magomedov, I think he absolutely punishes Oleksiejczuk every time Oleksiejczuk tries to pressure him and get into that boxing range. I think Magomedov is just going to... I think this is a really good fight for Magomedov in regards to having a good opponent in front of him that's going to bring the best out of him. I think we're going to see Magomedov smashing kicks, hard kicks to the legs, to the body, to the head, putting hands in between those kicks as well in combinations. And yeah, I just think that, look, Oleksiejczuk's going to have a couple of opportunities in this fight. Like, it's not going to be a whitewash. Oleksiejczuk will have moments where he can potentially catch Shara Magomedov clean, but I just don't think he possesses that total one-punch KO power that, some real big hitters in the division possess. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't hit hard, because he does. It's just there's a difference between hitting super hard and having that, notorious one-punch KO power that I don't think he has, that I believe he might need to beat Magomedov. And because of that, like I say, I think Magomedov's going to do some really good work with his striking, with his kicks, and I think we're going to see Oleksiejczuk, because he's so good and because of the boxing striking style, I think we're going to see him bring the best out of Magomedov. So for those reasons, I'm picking Shara Magomedov to win this fight. And in the next fight, we're back in the bantamweight division. I think we've got another good fight here as well. We've got Marlon Cheeto Vera versus Deiveson, God of War, Figueiredo. And like I said, I think this is a potential fight of the night. It could be an absolute banger. The only issue that I have with that, and in general with Marlon Vera, is, look, he's entertaining and he's a fighter that's been around for years, and he's got a good submission game. He's got good submission qualities. He's got knockout power as well. He's very big for the bantamweight division. And even though the numbers, in his physicality numbers, really might not be that great in regards to like height and reach and stuff like that, like he is on board roughly with where the bantamweight average is. He just looks really big inside the cage. Like, he must weigh way above 135 pounds or 136 pounds when it comes to fight night. So he's a really big bantamweight, and like I say, he's an entertaining fighter at times. But the one thing that's really frustrating with Marlon Vera that might suffer the fight of the night bonus is the fact that he can be so inactive. Like, there's so many moments in fights where he's just not providing too much action. He's waiting. Maybe he's waiting for his opponent to come at him so he can counter, or see where the mistakes and the holes are going to come from the opponent so he can make him pay. But, at this level in the UFC, you've got to do more than that. You've got to be more active. And of course, you can reference the Marlon Vera and Pedro Munoz fight when Marlon Vera landed 140 plus strikes. And, that was one of the fights where he was super active. That was a really good fight, that he did do a really good job. But it just doesn't come often enough. Like, you go back to the Frankie Edgar fight. This is a Frankie Edgar that's now retired, and he was on his way out in regards to the decline. When he fought Marlon Vera, Frankie Edgar landed almost 100 strikes. And Edgar got finished in that third round, so it didn't even go a full 15 minutes. And Marlon Vera is getting outworked by a Frankie Edgar in that manner. And Frankie Edgar also got 3 takedowns in that fight as well. And yeah, look, Marlon Vera ended up knocking him out late in round 3 and getting the win. Then you go to the Rob Font fight. And look, that was over 5 rounds. And yes, Marlon Vera did land almost 160 strikes, but that's 160 strikes against Rob Font's 270 strikes. And again, Marlon Vera won that fight. But again, you've got to watch the fight, because what was happening is Rob Font was winning almost every minute of every round. Almost every round. And what was happening is Vera was losing the round and then just putting it on Rob Font in the last 60 to 90 seconds of the round, hurting him or wobbling him or dropping him. He did drop him 3 times and then just stealing the round because of that. So he was losing, like I said, almost every minute of every round and then just working in the last 60 to 90 seconds and stealing that round from Font. Again, a lot of inactivity. You go to the Dominic Cruz fight. Dominic Cruz, again, a fighter that's probably not a million miles off being retired. His decline's there. That fight went into the 4th round. Dominic Cruz again landed almost 100 strikes against Marlon Vera. He was winning the fight, but then Vera exploded with a kick, knocked him down, finished the fight. Then the Cory Sandhagen fight, Vera did almost nothing. 58 strikes landed across a full 5 rounds. Somehow it was a split decision. That was bordering a legit robbery if Marlon Vera won that fight. But again, super inactive. Then Sean O'Malley, that was a title fight. Again, it went 5 rounds. Yes, he had a moment in the 5th round, but that's Sean O'Malley landing 230 strikes on Marlon Vera to Vera's 89. If you can't get up for a title fight and put that volume on and just throw everything at the champion, then when are you going to do that? You know, it's really tough to trust Vera because of the volume. And I know I've spent a little bit of time, you know, talking about Marlon Vera, but it's frustrating because he's such a good fighter. His striking is elite. He's got power. He's got good kicks, good combinations. He's got a decent wrestling game. His submission game, his jiu-jitsu is world class. I just really want to see more out of him, and until we get that consistently, it's really hard to trust him. On the flip side here, you've got Deiveson Figueiredo. Yes, he's come up from flyweight, but he's come up from flyweight. He's carried his strength and physicality over from flyweight. He's carried his power. He's carried his speed. He's a really good bantamweight, and I just don't think we're a million miles away from seeing Deiveson Figueiredo challenge for the bantamweight championship. It's just the only problem for him with that is, I believe when he finally gets there, it'll be Umar Nurmagomedov that's the champion, and he just won't be able to beat him. But even still, like, that's the ceiling in this bantamweight division that I'm seeing for Deiveson Figueiredo. He's an elite striker. He's got deceptive power. He's fast. He's got good combinations. His wrestling's good. His grappling's good. He's the total package. Again, the one slight knock on Figueiredo is sometimes he can be low volume, but he's packing power into everything that he does throw, and he can pick things up when he needs to. And he's also showing good fight IQ in this division as well. Like Cody Garbrandt was getting the better of him very slightly, but getting the better of him with striking. And Figueiredo decided to take the fight down to the mat. Found out that he was the better wrestler and grappler against Garbrandt, and just kept going to it until he found the finish. So look, I think it's going to be a very good fight. I'm hoping that both fighters do end up turning up in regards to the volume, but I'm struggling to look past Deiveson Figueiredo because I just think he's just a very slight level above Marlon Vera in regards to the activity and then the qualities within the strike and the wrestling and grappling and being able to gel and mix it all together inside the cage. So yeah, look, I really hope that we see a good fight here with a ton of volume, but whether we see volume or whether we don't, I think Marlon Vera to win this fight is going to be relying on, you know, those big explosive actions, the low percentage outcomes, whereas Figueiredo is going to be the better round winner and still have a finishing upside here as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Deiveson Figueiredo to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Tony El Cucuy Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa. And yeah, look, I think everyone's going to be saying the same thing in regards to, you know, the MMA fans, people that break down fights on X and on YouTube. I think everyone's going to be saying the same thing. We don't know how long Tony Ferguson's got left. Every single fight, it seems like everyone's saying, okay, this should be the last fight, and then Tony Ferguson keeps coming back, and I'm pretty sure Dana White said that, you know, he's probably not a million miles off either. So, look, where Tony Ferguson's at, he's 40 years old, he's stepping up to welterweight, so that is the one thing that I actually like for Tony Ferguson here, because he's not putting himself through a brutal weight cut, cutting a ton of weight. He's going to be bigger. The weight cut's less. The durability might be a little bit better for him as well, which is good. But he's 0-7 in his last 7 UFC fights. He hasn't won a fight for years. In fact, the last time he won a fight was against Donald Cerrone in 2019. So that was 5 years ago. That was a Donald Cerrone that was also on his way out, who's now retired. And Donald Cerrone wasn't actually looking that bad in that fight. Tony Ferguson wasn't looking his usual self. That's obviously when the decline started, and that, if you remember rightly, that's the fight where Tony Ferguson landed a late punch at the end of one of the rounds, and then Cerrone blew his nose, and his eyes blew. It broke Cerrone's nose. Cerrone blew his nose. It blew his eyes up, and then the fight got stopped because of that. And again, that was 5 years ago against a fighter that's retired now. So Tony Ferguson has lost his last 7 fights. 7 fights since then. Over the last 5 years, he's been finished 4 times out of those 7. The other 3 fights unanimously beaten comfortably. So yeah, it's a tough one here, and I don't think we're going to see anybody picking Tony Ferguson to win this fight. Like, Michael Chiesa is a fighter that, in my opinion, is probably also on a little bit of a decline. He's not the fighter that he used to be. He might have one foot out the door with all the stuff that he's doing with the UFC, which is really cool because he's got good fight IQ. He presents himself really well, breaks fights down really well as well. You can see that Michael Chiesa on these broadcasts, on the panels, he does really, really well. So, he's got a great career waiting for him outside of fighting. Maybe there's one foot out the door there, but in regards to this fight shouldn't be one that he's losing. I think that there's still a good fighter in Michael Chiesa, where I can't really say the same thing with Tony Ferguson at this level in the UFC. Michael Chiesa, again, he's going to have power in this welterweight division. He's massive for a welterweight as well. He's also got, good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu. Where Tony Ferguson has really been struggling recently is within the grappling as well, being on his back and not being able to work, which is actually quite a little bit surprising because Ferguson's jiu-jitsu has always been, one of the most prominent aspects of his game in regards to him just being an elite grappler. But it seems at this stage in his career, he's really struggling with guys on top of him. And Michael Chiesa is not only a very, very good MMA grappler, but he's also very heavy on top and very big as well. Ferguson coming up a weight division, I just think it's a nightmare matchup for Ferguson no matter which way you look at it. I don't think it's a nightmare matchup in regards to, Ferguson's going to eat a punch and get blasted and completely knocked out, but I just think it's a nightmare matchup in regards to me just not seeing how he wins this fight, because you can never really say never with the flash KO. These are MMA fighters at a high level with 4-ounce MMA gloves, but outside of that flash one punch knockout that Ferguson lands, with it being a small window of opportunity and a low percentage outcome, I just don't think he beats Chiesa anywhere in this fight, and I think Chiesa's just going to be able to get the fight down to the mat. I think he's going to be able to blanket him on top, potentially get a submission. If he doesn't get a submission, just be an easy 3-round decision for Chiesa. So for those reasons, I am picking Michael Chiesa to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Mackenzie Dern versus Lupita Godinez. And this is one of these interesting fights where one of the fighters is going to have to fight a different way because their style is going to put them into trouble. And we seem to see this quite a lot with Mackenzie Dern, actually. But it's also not Mackenzie Dern that's going to have to change anything up. It's going to be Lupita Godinez, because Godinez has got a good MMA wrestling game. She comes from a wrestling background. She's got sisters that compete at a relatively high level in wrestling also. But the issue here, and the issue other wrestlers have had against Mackenzie Dern, is if you use your strengths, which is the wrestling, if you're successful, then leads to the fight hitting the mat. That's where the problem is, because Mackenzie Dern is not only one of the best BJJ players in the UFC and in MMA, but she's also one of the best BJJ grapplers on the planet. So, yeah, look, if Lupita Godinez scores takedowns, gets Mackenzie Dern down to the mat, then I think she's playing with fire here. But the good news for Godinez is she doesn't have a bad boxing game. However, on the flip side, Mackenzie Dern is a fighter that's looking slightly better with the striking. Yeah, it's not completely there yet. Maybe it might never get there because, not every fighter can get to an elite level in every discipline within mixed martial arts. You're always going to have your holes, you're always going to have your flaws and your weaknesses. And for Mackenzie Dern, maybe she doesn't ever get there to being an elite striker, but I'll be honest, she's come on leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. So if this is a 15-minute kickboxing fight, I do expect Godinez to do the slightly better work. I do expect the boxing of Godinez to be better than the striking of Dern. But the problem is it's not going to be a 15-minute striking fight because Dern, at the very least, is going to be breaking the flow of that striking by shooting takedowns at Godinez, trying to get Godinez down to the mat. I genuinely don't believe that wrestling will be in the game plan of Godinez. If it is, then like I said, she's not fighting with good fight IQ there, because I don't think that she has a great deal of success on top of Dern before Dern starts hitting submission attempts, or maybe hitting submissions to sweep or sweeping in general. I think that Dern will get on top of Godinez if Godinez wrestles Dern down to the mat. But I also think that Dern could have some success taking Godinez down. I don't think it's going to be like your standard, traditional wrestling, standard double legs, single legs. I think it's more going to be body locks, trying to sneak round to the back, trip down to the mat, getting on the back of Godinez and riding the back and, getting a good position on top from there. I think that the striking of Godinez is going to be slightly better, but Dern can be competitive enough to hang with Godinez to then start hitting the takedowns and getting the fight down to the mat. And I do still think there is a very slight chance that Godinez might wrestle here, which again plays into Dern's path to victory, in my opinion. So for those reasons that I've mentioned, I'm picking Mackenzie Dern to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've actually got a low-key banger here. We've got Joel Alvarez versus Elves Brener. And I'm not completely sold on Elves Brener just yet. However, when I say I'm not completely sold on him, what I mean by that is I'm not sure what his ceiling is yet. Is he a good fighter? Yes. Is he a UFC caliber fighter? Yes. Is he a super entertaining fighter? Yes. He's got decent striking. He's obviously grappling is where his bread and butter is. So he's a good fighter. I'm just not sold on him being able to hit the top 15 just yet. And I think this fight is a very high volatile fight. It's got a lot of volatility in this fight. Like Joel Alvarez is dangerous. Look, I think that he's coming off a fortunate win against Mark Diakese. I think that Diakese was on his way to winning that fight. He was looking good, but then there was the clash of heads, and that led to Diakese being rocked, and Alvarez ended up, with the submission win from that. Without the clash of heads, I don't think that submission happened, and I think Diakese takes over, wins, and puts a loss on Alvarez's record. But, in regards to the record, there's a win there for Alvarez, and actually, because of that, his only losses in the UFC have come against Damir Ismagulov, which I'll talk more about Ismagulov actually in a bit with one of the other fights, but Ismagulov, at least at that time when Alvarez fought him, Alvarez had his UFC debut. I think he stepped up on short notice as well. Ismagulov was on a little bit of a heater then and just completely styled on Alvarez. And Alvarez's only other loss after that was Arman Sarukian, who was up there in and around a potential title shot. So Alvarez has only lost to the legit players in the UFC, or at least at the time that he fought them, whereas Elves Brener, yes, he's got that loss to Miktabek Oralbai, who I actually think is a really good fighter, but I just don't think he's quite at that level yet that Joel Alvarez is at. I think Alvarez is going to be really big. I think he's going to be strong, physical, powerful. I think Alvarez has got the slightly better striking here. If Brener takes Alvarez down, which I'm imagining that he's absolutely going to, because Alvarez seems to have very limited takedown defense and every fighter seems to be able to take him down. But the issue is Alvarez has got a super dangerous submission game, especially off his back, in guard as well. Does he catch someone at the level of Elves Brener with an armbar or a triangle? I think it's unlikely. But Alvarez can do, or has got skills good enough in the BJJ grappling area where he should be able to get back up to his feet, keep the fight standing, potentially even take Brener down. Look, if Brener gets put on his back, yes, Brener will be dangerous, but Alvarez will be really tough and be a really heavy blanket on top. So, like I say, it's a volatile fight because Brenner's got this, explosive finishing ability. He's also got a good top game as well. Alvarez can get taken down, and that's the volatile side from Brenner's side. But on the flip side, Alvarez has got ridiculous power on the feet. He's very big and physical for the weight class. He's also got a really dangerous submission game. So I could see a finish on either side. And if it goes to a decision, it could go either way. But I've got something in my gut telling me that Joel Alvarez is just slightly better than Elves Brener at this moment in each fighter's, career. I think that Joel Alvarez has got the experience edge. He's got a power edge, a physicality edge. and he's got the jiu-jitsu to be able to keep him safe against an Elvis Brener as well. So yeah, close fight, competitive fight, but I am leaning towards Joel Alvarez here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Joel Alvarez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we're in the light heavyweight division. We've got Alonzo Menifield versus Azamat Murzakanov. So Azamat Murzakanov, strange one with him. He's 13-0, unbeaten. There's fights where he looks really great. There's fights where he doesn't look really great. But at 13-0, he's winning every fight. So, you know, he's one of these fighters where I think that he is hit and miss in regards to his form, but he's been able to get the job done because of the level of competition that he's been fighting. Now, I've only bet Murzakanov once. I think I bet him, I think it was minus 175 or in and around that line against Tafon Chukwi, which, you know, in hindsight wasn't a good bet because what happened was Murzakanov lost the opening 2 rounds, and then when you thought he was tired and gassed and he didn't really have much left, he found this flying knee from hell and knocked Chukwi out, which cashed the bet. But since that fight, I've been really hesitant in regards to betting on Murzakanov because, again, even though I got the cash ticket, I didn't like the fact that, you know, it got to the 3rd round and I was almost screwing the ticket up and throwing it away. So Murzakanov, I think, has got to do more. But then, you know, he goes in there in his next 2 fights after that and he looked good. He's beats okay competition, and you know he's looking like a 13-0 unbeaten fighter that's doing good work. But I just think at some point he's going to hit a level of competition where he's going to struggle against. He might not have the best night on that specific night, and he's going to take that first loss at some point. And this might be the fight that does it because look, Menifield, what he did against Carlos Ulberg was absolutely wild. Like, I can't believe he did what he did in regards to just like pretty much charging at him and getting into a brawl with Ulberg early in the fight. The way you're going to beat Ulberg is staying out of the brawl, staying out of the exchanges as best you can, potentially trying to wrestle him or clinch with him, push his back up to the cage and wear him out till he's tired. Then you can go in and start exchanging. And to be honest with you, even though Menifield's got this, you know, he's physically freaking huge and he's got ridiculous power, he's got a ridiculous strength and physique attributes in with his game. But even with all that said, Menifield actually ends up in the clinch quite a lot, and it's not a great watch at times, but that's what he should have done against Ulberg and he didn't. But outside of that Ulberg fight, and Ulberg for me is one of the best strikers in the division as well, like you can't, you know, let's not get mixed up there. But outside of that Ulberg loss, Menifield's actually beaten some decent fighters. Misha Serkinov, he had that draw against Krut, but then he rematched him and beat him. He's fought some decent fighters. Menifield has, you know, Jacoby as well, same as Azamat Murzakanov. But I think that Jacoby might be okay in this fight. I don't think he's got to worry about, you know, an Ulberg that's going to be a high-level kickboxer that's going to have this huge power and speed advantage and movement advantage over him. Azamat Murzakanov, he does have power. Menifield's got to mind his P's and Q's, but he doesn't have this, you know, crazy world-class kickboxing ability with, you know, elusive striking and movement like Ulberg has. So I think this is a fight for Menifield where he's going to be able to dictate the pace and, you know, the distance of the fight a little bit better than last time out. I think he's going to have time. I think he's going to be able to figure out where Murzakanov is probably going to lose this or where he's going to beat Murzakanov in this fight. And although Murzakanov, like I say, is one of these fighters that just seems to be able to get the job done, I do think that that loss is coming soon, and I think it might be in this fight. It might be. Like, I think it's going to be a close and competitive fight. I think if Menifield can, you know, push Murzakanov's back against the cage, clinch with him, wear him out a little bit, the fight should get a little bit easier for Menifield the longer it goes on. Where Menifield is going to get stuck here, and I say this pretty much every single podcast I know I do, and I apologise for the regular listeners, but one of the hardest things to analyse and predict pre-fight is strength, physicality, and which fighter is going to be the stronger fighter. So if Menifield does actually clinch up with Murzakanov and it turns out that the Russian has got that freakish Russian strength and he's stronger, then my prediction might start changing a little bit. But we don't really know that until both fighters step inside the cage, and Menifield's frigging huge, like I've already mentioned. So yeah, look, for right now, I think that this might be the fight where Murzakanov takes the loss. So for those reasons, I'm picking Alonzo Menifield to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Mohammad Yahya versus Kaue Fernandes. Interesting fight. not really high on either guy, I'll be totally honest. I also can't believe that a judge was trying to rob Mark Diakese of that win against Kaue Fernandes as well, because that was disgusting. Like, that was a clear win for Mark Diakese, who actually injured his leg in the fight as well. I think it was his leg. But yeah, he injured himself in the fight and still managed to beat Kaue Fernandes easily. He was just levels above. But I do think that there is a decent fighter in there with Kaue Fernandes. He just wasn't on Mark Diakese's level. And when I say I'm not massively high on him, it's just because I want to see more from Kaue Fernandes before I make a concrete decision of exactly where I believe his ceiling is and how good of a fighter I think he is. But I do think there's something in there with Kaue Fernandes. He's explosive, he's got power, he's clearly got a decent all-round game. Like, he's not a specialist in one area that's got massive weaknesses in another area. Of course, when he fights somebody that's levels above him like Diakese, then he's going to get exposed. But at this level with Muhammad Yahya, this is a fight where both fighters are at each other's level. Muhammad Yahya coming off a decision loss to Trevor Peek, which when you're losing to Trevor Peek, you probably want to be losing by knockout, because Trevor Peek isn't really known for somebody that, you know, saves the gas tank and goes down the stretch and is piecing you up. Like, he's a brawler. He comes at you and tries to knock you out. So the fact that Yahya lost a decision to him is not a great look. I think that these fighters match up relatively well, but I think that Kaue Fernandes is going to be better slightly in every area. I think he's going to be the slightly better striker, the slightly better wrestler, the slightly better grappler. I think he's got the finishing upside here. I think if it goes to a decision, if you're losing to Trevor Peek on a decision, then you're probably going to lose to Kaue Fernandes by decision as well. So that's why, in my opinion, the betting line is so wide. Now, I don't think that Kaue Fernandes should be at minus 400. I think he should be close to minus 200, maybe minus 250 at a push. But regardless, from a pick and prediction perspective, I do think that Kaue Fernandes has got a good fight here to get on the board in the UFC, get his first UFC win, and then let's see what happens after that. So for those reasons, I'm picking Kaue Fernandes to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the big boys. We're in the heavyweight division. We've got Shamil Gaziev versus Don'Tale Mayes. Shamil Gaziev is a fighter that, I was on Shamil Gaziev. I bet him against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And yeah, it wasn't a good bet. And yeah, we saw where the holes actually are with Gaziev. But what you've got to consider here is it was a 5-round fight. I think it was the wrong time for a 5-round fight. It was not just a step up in competition, it was a huge step up in competition. And again, I think it was the wrong time for that. And Jairzinho Rozenstruik has been in and around the top of the UFC division for years, and I just think it showed. The reason I bet Gaziev against Rozenstruik is because Rozenstruik is so, flat on his back, doesn't really get back up to his feet. And we actually saw one moment late in one of the rounds in that fight with Gaziev and Rozenstruik where Gaziev did get a takedown, and again Rozenstruik didn't do too much. So the path to victory was there. It's just Gaziev wasn't able to access it. Whether he was concerned with the striking power of Rozenstruik, I'm not sure. And then obviously the longer the fight went on, he started tiring a little bit more, and he was getting pieced up and picked apart, and that affected the gas tank. So there was a lot that didn't go Gaziev's way, but I think it was the wrong fight at the wrong time for him. I still think there's a good fighter in Shamil Gaziev. I still think that he's got a bright future in the UFC. And I actually think from a loss perspective, he's going to take a lot from that loss against Jairzinho Rozenstruik to improve his game. But now the UFC have matched Shamil Gaziev against Don'Tale Mayes. And I think now this is the right fight at the right time for Gaziev. I think that Don'Tale Mayes is, he's serviceable in the UFC. Is he a UFC caliber fighter? I'd say yes. But it's sort of the lower end of the UFC heavyweight division where he's going to get his wins, not at the mid or the high level. And I think that Gaziev, at the very least right now, is mid-level. And that is, in my opinion, a level above where Don'Tale Mayes is going to win fights in the UFC. I think that still, Gaziev's got to be careful of the striking of Don'Tale Mayes. He can be a little bit explosive. He is quite athletic for the heavyweight division. He does have power. But I think that Gaziev has got more power than Mayes. I think that his pressure, his forward pressure, and being able to force his opponents back against the cage is going to cause an issue, because I don't think Don'Tale Mayes is the best fighter when he's having to fight on the back foot. I think he likes to be the front runner, the one that's, putting the pressure on his opponent, the pace. I just don't think he's going to get that against Gaziev. And then again, Gaziev has got a good top-side grappling game with the wrestling. We now know that the wrestling has to come at the right time in regards to finding the right entry so he's not having to overwork because of the gas tank. But I think Gaziev could get takedowns in this fight, get on top of Mays, who, again, is not the best fighter off his back, can get stuck a little bit flat on his back. So Gaziev's got multiple paths to victory here. I think that he could beat Don'Tale May's striking, even if it goes 15 minutes and it's just like a trade-in strike for strike. Maybe Gaziev gets up on the volume, hits a little bit harder. I think Gaziev has got a finishing upside on the feet, just like Mays has, to be fair, in this heavyweight division. But then when it comes to the wrestling and grappling, then Gaziev has got a second path to victory there as well. So yeah, and along with me, like I say, believing that Gaziev is a level above Mays in regards to being an MMA fighter and where they're at with the UFC. I think this is a good fight for Gaziev. I think the UFC are giving him a little bit of a reset, and for those reasons I'm picking Shamil Gaziev to win this fight. And in the next fight in the lightweight division, this is one of my favourite fights on the entire card. We've got Guram Kutateladze versus the newcomer making his UFC debut finally after all these years. We've got Jordan the Epidemic Vucenic, and it's a really good fight. Like I said, I'm super happy that Vucenic's finally got that call to the UFC. He's been a Cage Warriors champion, he's paid his dues, he's fought some real high level competition. I don't really want to be hearing anybody say, oh yeah, but his last couple of fights have been against lower level competition that aren't UFC caliber. But look, you've got to look at the bigger picture outside of that. Yes, he's fought slightly lower level competition in his last couple of fights, but he's handled them accordingly and won convincingly. But the fights that, look, he's had wars with Morgan Charrier, and again, I know that Charrier's stock has slightly dropped in regards to the eyes of some UFC fans, but Morgan Charrier, I promise you, is still a very good fighter. Then the Paul Hughes fights as well. Paul Hughes, the UFC, I believe, actually wanted to sign him, but I think he preferred the PFL offer, so he went to PFL. And Vucenic has fought and beaten some real good high-level guys and has finally got that call up to the UFC. And I think that a lot of people are overlooking him in this fight because of how high people are on Kutateladze. Like Kutateladze, I was actually with him in Sweden like a number of years ago with Hamzat Chimaev as part of the team over at All Stars Gym in Sweden. And look, Kutateladze is a real good guy. We got on. He was good to be around, and he's actually a good fighter as well. Like, he's got some legitimate skills, and he's good everywhere. Like, he's a good striker, he's a good wrestler, he's a good grappler. But Vucenic is also a very good striker, a very good wrestler, a very good grappler. And in regards to him stepping in on short notice, it is short notice. And some people might say in some scenarios that fighters that step up in short notice, up a weight class, they'll end up losing that fight and then they'll go back down in weight and then they'll to the real weight class and then do really well. But actually Vucenic, I believe, made the move up to lightweight in his career in his last fight just a couple of weeks ago in Cage Warriors. And now he's got the lightweight fight again here. So he's already fought at lightweight. I could be wrong with that. I don't know whether it was a career decision of, right, I'm now fighting at lightweight. But he looked great at lightweight, full. He looked strong. He looked physical. And yeah, I think that Vucenic's future could be at lightweight. So I don't think it's a move up a weight class here. In regards to the short notice, he's only just fought a couple of weeks ago. So he's still going to be in shape. It's still, not too far off from ending a fight camp. I just don't think it's a bad scenario for Vucenic. I think it could be better. Of course it could be better. He could have 8 weeks notice and preparation for a specific opponent, but it definitely could be worse. It could be an off the couch type of fight where he has to take that opportunity to get signed in the UFC, and like I say, he might not be in shape and all that sort of stuff, but it's not that type of fight. And like I said, here you've got Guram Kutateladze and Jordan Vucenic, who are both good strikers, they're both good wrestlers, they're both good grapplers, they've both got power, they've both got finishing ability, they can both fight for 3 rounds, they've both fought really good levels of competition. I just think that they are very evenly matched. And when you look at Kutateladze's UFC record, the Gamrot fight that he won, that's his only win in the UFC. The Gamrot fight, he even said in the post-fight interview inside the cage that he thought that Gamrot won that fight and he shouldn't have won on the judges' scorecards. So that's that fight. And then his next 2 fights, he loses against Damir Ismagulov. And again, I said earlier I was going to speak about Damir Ismagulov a little bit more. That Ismagulov fight at the time, it was a split decision. I bet Ismagulov to beat Kutateladze. That fight was actually really close and it was a split decision. So even though Kutateladze lost that fight, his stock rose because Ismagulov at the time, everybody saw as this world-class fighter that is going up right up to the top of the UFC and he'll probably be challenging for a title. But now what we know about Ismagulov is since that win, he's lost 2 in a row and has since retired from mixed martial arts and is no longer with the UFC. So was that the best Ismagulov that we got inside the cage against Kutateladze? No, I don't think so. I'm not trying to discredit the performance from Kutateladze, but I just don't think it was the split decision stock rising loss that we thought it actually was at the time. And then he goes in there and gets finished by Elves Brener as well, which again is not a bad finish, but you know, you would imagine Kutateladze should be beating that level of competition if he's as good as what everybody's making him out to be. And I do think he's a good fighter. It's just I'm not quite sure on his ceiling yet in the UFC, and he's won 1 out of 3. The one loss was a little bit hit and miss. So what I'm saying is I don't think his level's above Jordan Vucenic. I don't think Vucenic should be overlooked in this fight. I think it's a close and competitive fight. I think both fighters are really good in every single area, and I think it's going to show on the night. So yeah, I'm expecting a close and competitive fight, and I'm going to side slightly with the newcomer, so I'm picking Jordan Vucenic to win this fight. And in the next fight, another fight that I'm torn on as well, we've got Victoria Dudakova versus Sam Hughes. The reason I'm torn on it is because I think that Dudakova is the more skilled fighter. She's the more polished fighter. I think that she's good everywhere. I also think Sam Hughes has got good skills everywhere as well. But Sam Hughes, I don't think is as clean, as pretty and polished as Dudakova is within the skill set. But what Sam Hughes has got going for her is she's an absolute dog inside that cage. Like, you try and put it on Sam Hughes, and the likelihood is you're probably not going to finish her, and you're probably going to make her more determined to come back and beat you. Like, it's one of those Chris Lieben types of fighters where, you know, Lieben will start probably a little bit slow, just like Sam Hughes will start a little bit slow. The opponent will start getting the better of you and it'll just piss you off and turn you into a beast. And that's kind of what happens with Sam Hughes. Like, I think that Dudakova's going to start the fight better. I think she's going to look great. But the longer the fight goes on, the more we're going to see that dog in Sam Hughes come out and she's going to perform, and then she's going to start making the rounds close, and then we're going to get to a close decision. So that's what we've got here. Again, it's like, I get the dog in Sam Hughes, and I love it. I absolutely love that mentality and the ability to fight through tough fights in tough positions. But when it comes to a pick and a prediction, I'm just struggling to pick against the fighter who I think is more polished, is more technical, and does have that very, very slightly better skill set. Like I say, the dog in Sam Hughes is going to make this fight close, and he's going to make this fight ugly, and it's going to probably go to a decision. If there's no finish, of course, it'll go to a decision. But if it gets up to the scorecards, I think we're going to be left there thinking, well, shit, this could go either way. But from a pick and prediction perspective, like I say, I'm going to side with the fighter who I think is, again, slightly more polished, slightly cleaner in regards to the skill set. So I'm picking Victoria Dudakova to win this fight. And in the next fight, the third fight in a row of the podcast, I think we've also got a really close fight here. We've got Jai Herbert versus Rolando Bedoya. And yeah, look, I think it's a fight that's going to be won and lost on the feet. I think that Jai Herbert is a really solid striker, good technique. Like, he's polished. Like, he's a good fighter. He's got UFC experience. He's also well-rounded, so he's got the wrestling and the grappling, which I think might make the difference here. And when it comes to a pick and prediction, I'm looking for the very slight edges of where I think a fight may be able to change course and where a fighter might be able to switch things up if things aren't going the way. Whereas with Rolando Bedoya, he's a decent striker. He can be got at. He can be hit. I don't think he's, again, a fighter where I'm struggling to find out exactly where his ceiling is. Maybe he needs a couple more fights. If he goes out here and beats Jai Herbert, then yeah, I think that his ceiling definitely rises, and, you know, he's potentially going to be a fighter to maybe keep an eye on. But right now, I'm just struggling. I do know there's a decent striker in there. I do know there's a good fighter in there. I think on the feet, it's going to be really 50-50, though. I think they both land the good shots. I think Bedoya might have this slightly more increased power. I think Jai Herbert might be the slightly less durable fighter. So that's a potential, you know, side on Rolando Bedoya that could be a problem for Herbert. But I think Herbert, is the slightly better quality striker in regards to the shot selection, the fact that he'll use elbows, he'll use knees, he'll mix kicks in as well. But then where I'm really leaning on Herbert is if it's not going his way on the feet striking, I think Herbert can just mix things up, take Rolando Bedoya down, or at least force takedown attempts, which is going to break the flow of Bedoya, give him something extra to think about. That might open him back up for Herbert to start really putting it on him from a striking perspective. Whereas if it's not going Rolando Bedoya's way striking, I'm not sure he can do the same thing to Herbert in regards to taking him down and controlling him. So that's why I'm leaning on the Herbert side, because I think there's low-key a slightly second path to victory for Herbert, and he's the fighter that is more likely to be able to switch things up and go in a different direction if the fight's not going his way. So for those reasons, I'm picking Jai Herbert to win this fight. And in the next fight, the final fight to break down on the podcast, we've got a rescheduled fight between Cedriques Dumas versus Denis Tululan. I'm pretty sure I've already broken this fight down. I could be wrong, but it got added as a late fight during a fight week, and I can't remember exactly where they were supposed to fight, but the rumours that we were hearing online from the media was that there was maybe an issue with Dumas getting a visa into the country that he was due to fight in. And again, I can't remember which fight, which area that was, which place in the world that was, and again, I don't even know if those reports were true, but yeah, that's what I had heard online, that the visa issue was the reason Dumas couldn't step in on short notice in a certain fight in a certain country. But they booked that fight that they tried to book, or they should have had last time, and I think it's a good fight for Dumas. I'm not massively high on Denis Tululan. I think that he's dangerous. I think he's powerful. I think he'll get in the face of his opponents, and I think he's game for a scrap. I just don't know where he goes outside of that, because when the power is sort of being mitigated from the other side, when the opponent has weathered the storm, if the opponent's countering really well and Tululan's not that successful with his aggressive striking, where does Tululan go after that? And the answer is, I just don't know if he has that plan B. Whereas Cedriques Dumas has got a decent striking game. He's competitive striking. I don't think he's got as much power or aggression as Tululan, but he's definitely serviceable from a striking perspective. And then with Dumas, I think he's got a wrestling and grappling plan here that he'll be able to use. Maybe it's a plan B, but would be able to use against Denis Tululan to change the fight up. So a little bit like what I've just said with Jai Herbert and Rolando Bedoya. If it's not going Dumas's way, I think Dumas can change things up, maybe look at a different route. So if he is wrestling and grappling and it's not working, then maybe he can go to his striking and be successful there, and vice versa. Whereas with Tululan, if the fight's not going Tululan's way, where does he mix it up? Because if he's striking, he'd then have to mix it up with the wrestling and grappling, which, you know, it's okay, but I just don't think he's going to have a ton of success there. So, yeah, I think it's a fight for Dumas where he should be slightly better everywhere, but the main thing is the gas tank as well. Tululan really does tire and slow down the longer the fight goes on, and that's because he comes out at 100 miles an hour and gives everything early, whereas Dumas paces himself a little bit more and the cardio is better for that. So again, I think there's going to be a storm to weather for Dumas, but I think he does weather that storm, maybe mixes in a couple of takedowns within that storm just to slow things down and halt Tululan, but then the longer the fight goes on, the more it should favour Dumas. So for those reasons, I'm picking Cedriques Dumas to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast at UFC Abu Dhabi. Super excited to watch the fights. And as I've said before, thank you for everybody that tunes in, that listens. I really, really do appreciate it. Whether that's listening on one of the podcast platforms, you know, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, whether that's you guys on YouTube that are listening. And remember, with the YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, especially over the next 2 weeks, because there isn't going to be a podcast for UFC Vegas 95 or UFC 305 as I'm away on a holiday in Turkey. But I will be posting on our YouTube channel in a community post my picks, my predictions, and my method of victory as well. So if you are listening on one of the podcast platforms, please come over to YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll still get my picks and predictions over the next 2 weeks, even though there won't be a podcast. And finally, before I go, one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so over at MMAplay365.com. We've got everything in one package, whether you're a fun gambler that just likes the long shot parlays, whether you're a long-term gambler that makes your own bets but would just like to be reinforced by, some breakdowns, written breakdowns and recommended bets. We've got that section for you. If you're somebody that just wants to follow exactly what I bet on, then we've got an official bet section. But then, of course, we've got Base AI, our UFC prediction software, giving a percentage prediction for every possible outcome of every UFC fight. And that's all in one package. Just choose next event subscription, which is $5, a monthly subscription, which is $10, or if you want to pay annually, it's $99. So everything's affordable, allowing you the ability to win that money back and then start profiting on top of your bets. That's all from me. That's at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again in 3 weeks' time after my holiday in Turkey. Enjoy the fights, and we'll see you in a few weeks.